Now I'm going to show you how to use formulas in Excel. A formula allows you to evaluate a function of the data from one or more cells, and then it displays the results. There are a whole bunch of ways that you can use formulas to your advantage, and I'm going to show you several examples of how to use formulas with respect to this data set, and hopefully you'll get an idea of the different ways in which formulas might be used. To begin, we're going to use the data on the size of the labor force for men in the United States and the size of the labor force for women in the United States to compute the size of the total labor force for the United States. And before I do that, I want to expand the width of the columns of the data because it looks like the headers are being obscured by their neighbors. So to do this, I'm going to come up to the F and G above labor force for women, put the cursor right in between where I get this sort of left and right arrow cursor, and I'm going to double click, and this will automatically expand the width of the column so that the widest element in the column will be visible. And I'll do this for the other columns so that I can see clearly what are the column names. Then I'll save my data, Control S or Command S. Okay, now what I would like to do is add up the values in column E with the values in column F to get a new column, column G. We're gonna come over here to the first row in column G, and I'm gonna give this new column a title. This is the labor force. Call it labor force dash total. This is total labor force for the United States. And again, I'll go ahead and make this a little bit wider too. Okay. Now, to begin, I'm going to come down to the second row in column G, and I'm going to start typing a formula. To do this, I start with the equal sign. This tells Excel that whatever comes after is to be computed and evaluated, not just displayed. So I can type the equal sign, and now I can use the cursor, or excuse me, I couldn't use the cursor. I can click around like this, and you can see a coordinate shows up after the equal sign that corresponds to the the current cell that's highlighted. And I could also use the arrow keys and navigate like this. So what I'm going to do is navigate over here to the labor force for men. This has coordinate E2, and I'm going to press the plus sign. And now I move over to the labor force for women in January 1948. This has coordinate F2. I could have typed this out directly, equals E2 plus F2, but it's a little easier to just navigate like this with the arrow keys. And I press enter. Okay, and I have a computed value displayed for the total labor force of the United States in January 1948. If I use my arrow key, go back up and highlight the cell that I just edited, coordinate G2, I can look in the formula editor bar and see that the formula is still saved. So while the value is displayed, the actual content of the cell is the formula and not the value that is displayed. Okay. An important thing to keep in mind that Excel will have information in a cell that is not always visible just by looking at the spreadsheet. Okay. So now what I want to do next is have this, I would like to have this formula down the entire column of G, at least until the end of the data. Okay. So there are a couple of ways I could do this. I could just type the formula in again. This is equal to E3 plus F3. Okay, but that's going to take me a while to do that, and that seems like not a great use of time. Okay. Another thing I could do is I can come back up to G2, do Command or Control C, and then paste Command or Control V. Okay. And you see what happens while I copied E2 plus F2 and pasted it, the result is actually E3 plus F3. So Excel understands that when I copy a formula and paste it, it understands I probably don't want to copy the exact formula. What I want to do is copy and paste the relationship. Okay, so it adjusts the coordinates relative to where the original cell was. So the letter coordinates or the column coordinates E and F are the same because I have copied and pasted the cell down, but it has adjusted, was added 1 to the row coordinates. Okay, so that's a really, really helpful, useful thing that we can exploit. All right. If, for instance, you did not want that behavior, suppose you actually really wanted to copy E2 and F2. Well, what you could do is put dollar signs in front of the parts of the component, the parts of the coordinates that you want to fix. So if I wanted to fix the entire coordinate, I would do something like this. So $E, $2 plus $F plus $2. Okay, it doesn't change the value that's reported in the first element of column G. If I copy that and paste it, now Excel copies the exact formula that was in G2 into G3. Okay, this is not particularly useful right now, so we're going to undo that by Command Z or Control Z. Okay, so we could now say copy, paste, 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 paste. You can do this a lot, but there's a lot of elements, right? The data goes down for hundreds of elements. So I don't think we want to do that. What we can do instead, though, is find we can just highlight the last cell that we pasted a value into, or pasted a formula into, and I can take my cursor, hover over the bottom right corner where of the highlighted cell to where my cursor goes from the little hand, or the white, the open cross plus sign, to the hand, to where it goes into this little black cross right here, and I click and I can drag, and when I do, it just pulls the formula down. Okay, and I can just pull, 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 and as I do, the formula is brought down to the very end. Okay, and I can click at the very end, inspect the formula, click in the formula editor, and verify that the formula is in fact copied and pasted the way that I wanted it to be copied and pasted. In fact, it is. Okay, so with a relatively small number of keystrokes, we now have labor force data for the United States for all of the months and years in the data set. Okay. So that's a super useful thing to do. Okay, we could also, if we wanted to be, this would be a little too much for this particular example, but we could have used a built-in function to do something very similar. So let's do this. Let's create a new column, column H, and we'll call this labor force dash total, and we'll call it parentheses 2, something like that. So we're going to do the same thing, but in a different way. Okay, and again, I'll increase the width of the cell so I can see the full title. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a built-in function. So I'll type equals, and I'll type S, and as I start typing, you can see that there are some suggestions of functions you might want to use, and there's a whole bunch that are available. So I'm going to keep going. It looks like I want the sum function. The function name is not case sensitive, so I can type equals sum, and then functions, and you write f of x in math. There's the name of the function is f, and the parentheses come after the name of the function with the arguments inside, and the same thing here. So equals sum, which is the name of the function. I have to open and close parentheses, and you can see that the information given here is that I need to have at least one number going into the sum function, but I can have more than one. I can have number 2 and 3. And what I want to put in here is actually a range. So I'm going to use my arrow keys, find the labor force for men, and what I want to do is highlight not just the value of the labor force for men, but also the value for women. So I'm going to hold Shift and highlight the corresponding value for women. And so you can see the coordinate now inside the sum function is E2 colon F2. And I'll close the parentheses, and you can see that I get the same answer that I got before. Now, this little green arrow in the top corner is giving me a little warning. It suggests that maybe there's some adjacent cells or some other things that I would have wanted to put into this formula, and just letting me know that maybe I made a mistake. I don't think that's particularly helpful right now, so we'll just ignore that. Okay, and now I can do the same thing that I did before. I can drag the bottom right corner and populate the remaining rows. And it looks like the answer is aligned with what we got previously. Okay, so the sum function in this case is probably not particularly useful. It's not that much more helpful than what we had before, but you can see a way of using the sum function. Okay, now let's do another example here. What I want to do now is compute the share of women in the total labor force. And so we'll do that. We'll do the share of women and men in the total labor force. So let's do LF share men and LF share. Okay. And so the share, well, we'll go ahead and expand the size of the columns. The share is just equal to the size of the labor force. I'm sorry, the size of the labor force for the respective group divided by the size of the total labor force. And we'll do the same thing for women. So women, come over here to labor force for women divided by total labor force. And maybe it's worth making sure that these numbers add up to 1, and they do, okay, which is not surprising. All right, we'll delete that. Okay, now here I've got 2 formulas side by side, and I want to bring these down to the very bottom of the data. And what I can do is highlight both of them and drag. And even though the formulas are different, Excel understands that I would like to bring both of these cells down in the respective columns. Okay, and there we go. Now we have data on the relative shares of labor force that are both men and women. Okay, so that's also useful. Okay, now we can do some other things here. Let's scroll down to the very bottom here. And I want to compute some statistics based on this data that we just computed. Okay. So what I would like to do is compute, let's say, the average and type and standard deviations of these shares of the labor force that are men and women. Okay, so I'm going to begin by typing equals AVER. Okay, looks like there's a function called average. And I want to highlight all of the shares of men in the US labor force for each month. So, and I can hold shift and use the arrow key to start highlighting, but that's going to take a long time. So if I type shift command or shift control, press up, I will highlight everything. I want to come down 1, still holding shift, come down 1 and not include the column title and close parentheses. And you can see that even though I can't see the cell that I'm editing directly, I can look up here in the formula editor bar and see that my formula looks like what I want it to look like. Okay, press enter. There we go. So on average, men have occupied, it looks like, about 59% of the labor force. Okay, now we can take this and copy, paste it 1 column to the right, and find the same statistic for women. Okay. Now I want to also calculate the standard deviation for these respective series. So I'll type equals STD, and you see that there are several options appearing. We're going to choose standard deviation stdev.s. This is the one that you want to use. And if I just type if I just press enter, I wish it automatically filled in the name of the function that I selected, but it doesn't. So I got to type the whole thing out, st, or maybe I got to use my arrow key. There we go. Okay. And now again, I'm going to come down here, start selecting elements to put into the function. There we go. There's the standard deviation. Okay. So on average, men are about 59% of the labor force, and the average sort of fluctuation of men's occupation of the labor force is a relative size of the labor force is about looks like about 6%. Okay, so copy this, move it once to the right, then we got the standard deviation for women, and it looks like it's exactly the same. Okay, so now we've seen some examples for how to use formulas, how to construct a basic formula, how to copy that formula, paste it to other cells. Okay, so you can compute a bunch of, you can evaluate a function a bunch of times. We've seen how to use some built-in functions, including the sum, average, and standard deviation functions. Okay. One more thing that I want to show you is how to copy the values that are returned by a formula and paste the actual values. Okay, because sometimes that's what you want to recover. Sometimes maybe you evaluate a function and you actually don't want to leave you don't want the formula anymore. You just want the values. Okay, and so. How can we do that? Let's go back all the way up here to the very top. All right, so let's suppose I want to copy this value for the share of women in the labor force in January 1948. It was 28%. Okay. If I copy this and paste over here, I get 0 because what is actually being evaluated here? It is I2, which has no value, divided by J2. So the value is 0. Now, that's not what I want to paste. What I want to paste is this 0.28 number. Okay, so what I need to do, I'll delete that, is I right click in the cell where I want to paste, and I come down to paste special. And you see there's some options. I don't actually see the option that I wanted. Let me try this again. So copy, paste special. Okay, there we go. And values is the thing that I'm looking for. Okay, some of the formatting things are also useful in some contexts, but right now I just want to paste values. And if I paste values, you can see that column M2 is now, I'm sorry, not column, but element M2 is 0.28, has the actual digit in there, whereas element K2 is still equal to the formula. Okay. So sometimes this can be super useful. If you want to copy and paste the values of the entire column, go ahead and add a column title for this. So these are going to be the values for the women's share in the US labor force. I'll highlight this entire column of data. Command or Control C. Again, I can come over here to just the first element in the cell where I want to start the paste from. I come down to paste special, go to values. All the values are pasted there. Okay, so sometimes this can be a useful tool. So it's good to have it in mind.